Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Feel Better, Live More. Now, this episode actually is a best of, a compilation of the last couple of years of me releasing weekly podcasts, and I've decided at the end of the year to share, some of those best of clips that have really, really resonated with my listeners. I've decided to do it on a certain theme this year because my new book, Feel Better in 5, is coming out very, very shortly. And in it, I've split up health into 3 sections: mind, body and heart. Mind is about doing things each day that actually help to nourish and feed your mind. Body is about movement and how and why we move and how we should move. And heart actually is probably the most important part of health, I think, and it's about human connection. So to start off, you're going to see some of the best clips of my previous conversations about our minds.
When we speak about what people can do when they're stressed out on an LA freeway, when they're about to go into a meeting with a boss and you're anticipating something not going well, when you're coming home and your relationship hasn't been good, the time-tested method and the one that we now know. See, I don't want to just tell you things without telling you how I know and why I have the privilege to be even asked that question. To me, it's meditative breathing. It's a very powerful way to quell that anxiety storm that those instinctive structures have done. I'm going to see my boss, and those subcortical structures are firing and they're unhappy, much like you'd see a snake or you're at the edge of a cliff. There's certain things that should be released in your body, but those have been repurposed in a negative, destructive way where we feel that at work, we feel that at home, we feel that when we look at certain social media. How do we tamp that down? Just like we would slowly walk away from a fear of heights, how do we walk away from just the general anxiety that's filled our life during the day? And I deeply believe, and particularly now because there's hardcore data, and I'll go into this a little bit, is meditative breathing. I don't know what mindfulness is. I don't know what your mind is thinking or my mind is thinking or your mind is thinking, but I know that the brain is connected to the lungs and the heart through this thing called a wandering nerve. It comes down, and that the brain can send signals down to your heart, and Buddhist monks can slow down their heartbeat. I know when I put a little coil on there for people with epilepsy, kids with epilepsy, a vagal nerve stimulator, and we send electricity, the electricity can actually go upward into your brain. Wow. And quell epilepsy. Epilepsy seizures are an aberrant electrical activity of your brain. Think of it as an arrhythmia of your heart is epilepsy of the brain. It's called a vagal nerve stimulator. It's been around for a while. This is something you can look up right now. We put electrical coil on this nerve, and it calms electricity. It's not even in the brain. But meditative breathing, deep breathing, and in a count of 4 to go in, a count of 3, 2, 1 to hold, and a slow release. If you do that just a little bit before you engage in that next stress-provoking task, it too works like a vagal nerve stimulator without us having to do a little surgery to calm the electricity in your brain. And you're saying, well, okay, that sounds, where did you get that? Well, we know, meditation's been going on for a long time. We've seen Buddhist monks do certain things, and others, deep divers are a great example of that. But we know this now because a study came out last year. They went through like meditative breathing with these patients and these kids and these young people, and they're watching the electricity change and get closer to that alpha wave, get closer to the calmer electrical signals in their brain after just deep, slow, deliberate breathing. And that's accessible to us all without having to pay for it. It is a resource available to you that has been harnessed for millennia, and that now you have crazy brain surgeons providing you the electrical proof if you're a skeptical kind of person. To me, that's magic.
Well, I fully believe that just like doing aerobic exercise can help you to reduce levels of the stress hormone cortisol, that speaking out loud or writing down these thoughts that are racing round and round in your head, instead of suppressing them or just letting them build up, till it feels like your head's going to explode, is a way of reducing stress. So actually, if you've got anxieties or negative thoughts and you write them down, or you have somebody that you trust that you can talk to, it gets it out of your brain-body system, just exactly like exercising can release stress hormones from your brain-body system.
I talk a lot about health and well-being, and we often talk about food and exercise and sleep and stress, which of course are all very, very important. But what I really like about your approach is that you you talk a lot about how important our thoughts are, how important our mind is, and I don't feel that that gets enough airtime when we talk about health and well-being. Why is it that our thoughts are so important?
So I actually think that the pillars that you talk about, like sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, they're important to improve the quality of our thoughts. Because if you actually think about it, why are you doing those things? You're not just doing it so that your body is in good shape. You're doing it so that you can think more clearly, you can do your job better, you can have better relationships. And all of that really boils down to how you think. So all the physical factors put your brain in good condition, and then it's what you do with it that really counts.
Yeah, I guess it's it works both ways, doesn't it? Because I guess, paying attention to these physical factors helps your brain function, helps you think more clearly. But at the same time, I guess if you change your mindset and you work on your thoughts, it can make it easier to actually do a lot of these physical things we're talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the chapters in the book is about that brain-body connection. So I think because psychology was around for a long time before we could scan brains and bodies, it left us with this sort of idea that there's a cut-off at the neck and that what you think and feel isn't connected to what goes on in your body and vice versa. But absolutely, if you're cold or hungry or tired, it affects the quality of thinking. And if you're confident or anxious, it affects the nerves and hormones in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this whole brain-body connection that you do beautifully talk about in the book is so important. And I guess for me, it's something that's really been missing in my medical training. It's something that I think has been missing for a long time in medicine, particularly 20th century medicine, the way we've, the way medicine really, really evolved to do so many great things. But I think we've lost that idea that really, I guess, people have known for donkey's years. Was that one of your frustrations with medicine?
I heard you speaking about that on another one of your podcasts, and it absolutely resonated with me. I was almost relieved to hear you say it, to feel like I'm not the only one. And you'll notice that I sort of started the book by talking about how we evolved and the fact that once we developed this cortex, which is much more, a modern part of the brain that we use for articulated speech and for predicting and planning for the future, the part of the brain that had got us to that point, the intuitive, emotional part of the brain, sort of seemed to be downgraded by society, like logic and being able to speak suddenly became important, and gut feeling and emotions just became less important.
Diet and mental health. Until recently, as a conventional medical doctor, the widespread view was that our diets don't really play that much impact in terms of the way that we feel. What is going on there?
Yeah, I think, there's been this long-standing, dichotomy between mind and body, this idea that somehow the brain was up here and the body was down here and they really didn't have a lot to do with each other. What really got me interested in the link between nutrition and mental and brain health was the understanding, probably, late 1990s, early 2000s, that the immune system seemed to be really central, particularly with depression. It seemed to be both cause and consequence of depressive illnesses. And of course, nutrition is a really strong driver of immune function. And also in the early 2000s, a lot of neuroscience work coming out of America that looked at the impact of nutrition as well as exercise on brain plasticity, in particular this region of the brain called the hippocampus, which is really important for learning and memory as well as for mental health, and showing that you could manipulate that in animal studies rapidly by altering diet and also exercise. So there was this emerging evidence that, of course, the mind and the body were, one highly complex integrated system. And our new knowledge around the gut and the gut microbiota is really solidifying that knowledge and giving us some more insights and targets for our research and potentially our prevention and treatment strategies.
I hope you enjoyed those clips there about our minds. If you want to, you can obviously go back and listen to the entire episode with my guests to find out more. Now, straight from mine, I'm going to move on to what I call the second component of our health, which is our bodies. We know we should be moving more. We know there's a whole variety of different movements, whether it's strength training, interval training, doing something like yoga. But have we missed the real point of movement? And there's a couple of conversations here that I think you're really going to enjoy about movement, why we should move, but also what are the benefits of doing so.
I would suggest to people who look at running as painful, who look at running as something that causes injury, to approach running in a totally different way. Instead of looking at running for performance, running for miles, running for body shape, running for burning calories, looking at running as a pathway to transformation. I mean, running will get you any of those previous examples that I mentioned. It's like if you want to lose weight, running will do that for you. If you want to look better and feel better, running will do that for you. The question is, like, how many of us look at running as that kind of tool, as a way to get into our innermost self? And so the prescription for running as an act of transformation requires being soft between your ears, learning how to connect with your heartbeat, learning how to connect with your spiritual heart, and letting those energies drive your run rather than your GPS watch, rather than thinking about what you're going to eat or what you're going to do afterwards, rather than even listening to music and having some external source pump you up for 3-4 minutes at a time. If you strip away what's between your ears, you end up having a naturally beautiful experience, because running or walking or moving with our feet, when done with the right intention, is one of the most natural things out there.
Yeah, so powerful. It has such potential to be transformative if we reframe the narrative around running, around walking, around exercise. I'm putting that in inverted commas, this whole idea of exercise. Actually, in many ways, even that term, by using that term, we've sort of lost the essence of what it is, really.
For the Navajo, running is a celebration of life. And when I would go to, quote, races on the Navajo res, there's 80-year-olds in jeans and boots doing the race. There's little kids in flip-flops doing the race. And afterwards, there's just sense of like, we all achieved something together. Yeah. We're going to celebrate the winners, but we're going to celebrate the fact that we're all out here. And it's like running is that channel for really feeling that life can be a celebration.
Yeah. Why do you have no chairs in your house?
Just because I want to raise as many socially extreme eyebrows as possible. No. Again, we are a species destined to be innately empowered, wild, and connected, right? And the way that comes around is that we have this amazing physicality, social and spiritual self. And when you understand the physical self, again, one of those fundamental physical needs is movement and play, okay? So I used to own a Pilates studio, and so I thought that was on the rung of the ladder of movement. And most of the people that come and see me, it was really symptom relief. Trying to reconfigure a posture that was basically compromised by modern life. And it's the modern part of life, which is a sedentary lifestyle. Now, 83% of the UK are living in urban environments. We're spending 90% of our time indoors. What are we doing in that time indoors? Most of it's sitting, right? So if we're sitting in one posture, and I have a Pilates studio that's designed for symptom relief, why keep dealing with the symptom? Why not go to the cause, which is the chair? And then if I look to nature for the perfect example, because I look to the natural world and the natural beings of the world for the solution, because again, we can only look to nature for a natural condition, right? So I can do that through sleep, rest, play, whatever it is. In this case, it's, right, look at the chair. Does a chair exist in nature? No. So if we then look at, there's 100 different rest positions on the ground. Once you understand them, you can see that they're little micro nutrients of the macro skill of actually standing up.
Right.
So you have kids, right? So we observed our kids. Because I have a movement background, I was just obsessed and recording bit by bit of their movement, which is their motor skill milestones, how they unravel. So they have various different rest positions on the ground that enable them to become upright beings, right? None of that involves a chair, but they manage to get completely upright. They have the best postures ever, right? Up until the age of 6, 7, you don't have to go to physios or Pilates. You just have incredible physiology. And you can jump, run, lift, carry. You can do all these things that we're having to relearn and reconnect with. They already have it. So for me, I had to remove the chair because I had to be the best example for my kids. So if I'm sitting, my kids are going to want to sit. I can't say to them, no, you're not allowed on the chairs. You have to keep unraveling all these 100 different rest positions. So partly was to be the best example of a human being for my kids to observe the behaviors. But mostly it's just every one of those rest positions helps feed and nourish an amazing physiology that then the macro skills can come from walking, from running, through jumping, through lifting, through carrying, through throwing, defending, swimming. All of those things, the hierarchy within them is the posture. And the micronutrient or element of that macro skill of the posture is all the ground rest positions. Unfortunately, when we sit, it's detrimental to the posture because we get locked in the hips, locked in the ankle. We revert back into a very old primal pattern, if you believe in evolution. Like 35 million evolutions, we're a C-shaped primate. So when we sit down, we then start to take on the C-shaped spine of the primate. It's very quick. And then if you start to then put a pad in front of you or a computer in front of you or a screen in front of you, you adopt even more of a C shape, which we call slumping, but really it's just adopting a very ancient spinal position. Then when you stand from that, of course, the head position is totally out. It's forward of the base of support, which means then when I simply walk or I run or any of those things, it means I have to keep striding further and further out because otherwise I'd fall over if the foot wasn't there. So it's just understanding that the ground rest positions, it's nature's cure really for a lot of the ills that I see within people's posture or within their physiology.
Yeah.
So there's joints that primarily should be offering mobility, some that offer stability. The pelvis should be offering stability and the thoracic spine should be offering mobility. When we sit down in a chair, it defies all of that. But when you upload the rest positions on the ground, like simple things like kneeling I'm doing now up on a chair, this is a single leg kneel, but it's the single leg squat just the same.
Yeah.
It nourishes the ankle, stabilizes the knee, mobilizes the hips. And then I can build my posture above it. So it's opening up the locomotive joints and then allowing the muscles and the tendons within that system to understand their role, which then we can become more efficient, minimize the risk of injury. And aesthetics, we just have a system that understands its role. Therefore, I'm going to be physically stronger and look physically stronger and more empowered because my posture's aligned, you know?
So I hope you enjoyed those conversations on mind and on body. And now on to the final section of health that I think is probably the most undervalued, but arguably the most important, and that's our hearts. This is about human connections. Connections with the world around us, connections with our partners, with our family, but also connection with ourselves. So my team and I have gone through and picked a few previous episodes where I've spoken to my guests on my podcast about how important human connection is. I hope you enjoy these clips. We do wait for perfection too much, don't we? And when all we're looking for is progress.
Yeah, so just focus on it being good enough. Be kind to yourself. Know that you're going to fail at times and progress is going to happen. And I think at some point we do just need to try to let go. And actually, often things feel perfect when we accept them. If we can have that attitude of just being more accepting and embracing things as they are, things start to feel as we imagine they would when they're perfect. We get that sense of contentment and that sense of satisfaction. So I think it's about, trying to cultivate some more acceptance.
How can people who are listening to this and who recognize some of the tendencies we're talking about say, I'd love to change that. I would love to be more accepting of myself, but I find it hard. What can they do?
Yeah, so many of us find it really hard to accept compliments or even think about ourselves in a positive way. And I think a really key first step is to start to train yourself to think of yourself in more positive ways. We are often in a pattern of always beating ourselves up, or, in terms of negativity bias, which is just the way our brains are wired, we naturally look for the negatives in things or the criticisms because it was a survival mechanism in the past. But we can counteract that by thinking about what were 3 things that you appreciated about yourself today. What did you do well today? What do you like about yourself today? Did you overcome a challenge? Did you help someone? Did you complete a project? And getting into that habit of every day thinking of 3 things that you can appreciate about yourself starts to train your mind to look for more things to appreciate about yourself. And you eventually start to think of yourself in a more positive way. And this can grow your self-esteem, your confidence. You can be kinder to yourself as a result.
True happiness is the absence of the search for happiness.
I just want everyone listening to just sit with that for a couple of seconds.
True happiness is the absence of the search for happiness. If you really get that, that is true peace. Because what you're saying is, I'm totally okay where I am. I don't need things to be different. And I'm not relying on some idealized one day future where I think that I'm going to be happy, which would be the pursuit of happiness, which ironically is in the Declaration of Independence in America. The pursuit of happiness. I'm like, well, how about you just be happy now? Now, that's not to say we rest on our laurels. I'm creating a lot. I'm very aspirational. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm building lots of things because it's fun to create. But I am simultaneously completely at peace and content with the way that my life is today.
Yeah, I love that. That is something I will sit with this evening for sure.
And that to me is the greatest precursor to healing, because stress, as you know, as a doctor, is synonymous with sickness, right? The inflammatory response as maybe the precursor to all diseases, right? But stress, what is stress? I'm saying that I am in conflict with my current circumstance. I don't want things to be the way they are, which is I use the word resistance. I'm in resistance with what that person said. I'm in resistance with the way my bank account is. I'm in resistance with the way that my boss deals with things. I get it. I'm not saying any of them are ideal. I'm not saying that you want them. But your resistance to the way life is massively futile. And it is the precursor to the dis-ease psychologically and emotionally that then manifests eventually physiologically. If you can find harmony, I tell people I have an intimate relationship with reality. I am at peace with what is. It doesn't mean that it's ideal. I may be working on things to improve, but I'm not in conflict with the way that life is currently. And for that reason, my experience is freedom and peace. I tell people you can't create the life of someone you don't yet believe yourself to be.
Yeah.
Right. So again, this is one of my quotes that I use in my book, right? So it's like recognizing that if you're wanting to create a certain life externally, then if you don't emulate that internally in the way that you view yourself and the way that you speak about yourself, the way that you behave, then you're, to use the English expression, you're pissing into the wind, right? It's not going to work because you're going against the grain of how you're fundamentally conditioned. I'll use a sports analogy because I think, I work with a lot of professional athletes and it's a beautiful metaphor for life. So I was hired by a very successful basketball player here. And he was struggling from the free throw. Like when one of the players gets fouled, you go to the free throw, it's a relatively easy shot. The league average is 75%. So when a guy is fouled, he goes to the free throw line, usually makes the 1-pointer, 7, 8 times out of 10. This guy's average was 35%. So, it wasn't even close to average. It was half the average. And you can imagine he was, losing sleep. It was affecting his personal relationships at home because of the stress. Crowds were starting to boo. And here's somebody who's getting paid millions of dollars. There's literally millions of fans. They're fanatical here in the States about their sports. And it was costing him a lot. He was really, really struggling. So the point about addiction and why I'm using this sports metaphor as a comparison is he had become addicted to the fact that he had a problem. So when I met him, I said, you're probably speaking to everyone you can, from players, coaches, even sports psychologists. He's like, I'm doing everything I can to fix the problem. I said, and therein lies one of your biggest obstacles, because you keep reinforcing the belief that you've got a problem. Do you remember the movie Men in Black with Will Smith, and they waved the black wand after they'd seen the aliens to wipe their memory? So I said to the guy, I said, if you had no memory, where's your problem? Just to start to give him an indicator that what he's fighting is his history. So now he goes up to the free throw line. He isn't even focused on what he's trying to accomplish, which is make the basket. He is trying to avoid his history of hurt, trauma. I'm not a big fan of the word trauma, but past failings or disappointments where we got upset. And now he's standing there literally trying to fix his history. But that's only impossible. So, I played with a guy, as you can probably imagine. I'm coming from a lot of love and compassion. He's doing the best he can. It's affecting him dramatically. But I said, once he got to see it, I used a metaphor. You're like driving a car, but the way you're driving the car is you're looking in the rearview mirror. So all you're seeing is what's behind you. And then you wonder why you keep running into shit.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, then I said to him, what if I told you that for the rest of the season, you shot league average? Let's just be, we'll be conservative. You shot 75% instead of 35, 37. His shoulders dropped. He had the biggest smile on his face. This guy's huge. He's like, 7 foot something. And he's like, that would feel amazing. I said, what I just presented to you is a future that is as real as the one you're concerned about. The difference is, I recognize that as a possibility, whereas you're so busy trying to avoid your history that you're actually standing in the line in a state of anxiety, which is self-perpetuating. It's self-fulfilling. Both the futures, you're worried about one. Mine is phenomenal, or at least better. They're both made up. Why? Because we're still sitting in your house. We haven't gone anywhere. But mine elicits joy, freedom, relaxation. If you're an athlete coming from freedom, joy, and relaxation, I don't care what sport you're doing, you're going to do it better than if you're coming from tension, anxiety, and worry. That night, he had a game. He shot 6 out of 8, so that was 75%. And for the rest of the week, he shot 68%.
Way better than previous.
Almost double if you're into that kind of stuff. Yeah. Right? So what happened is, going back to the addiction, is most people are completely addicted to their history and then spending the rest of their life trying to compensate for it. Versus, what are you committed to? What's the future you're stepping into out of pure creation versus reaction? And it's a distinction I make. Most people are reactive versus creative. Let's wake up and find so much more joy and freedom for ourselves and come from a place where we're creating an extraordinary future that we're working towards versus trying to fix a history behind us, which we can't do anything about anyway.
Yeah.
2 totally different worlds to live in.
When you see firsthand the impact that having deep connections makes in your life, you start to realize that it's important to prioritize. No different than some of your listeners who are prioritizing their sleep or their mindfulness or their mindset or their diet. You make it a priority because you see the value of when it's there and you see the value when it's not there. And again, for anybody who maybe hasn't seen that, it usually shows up when we're going through challenges in our life. When we fall down, when we go through a tough time in our life, a breakup, transitioning jobs or careers, a business idea not working out, a challenge that we're having with our kids or our spouse, it's usually then when we look up and say, do I have people around me that can lift me up when I'm down? And if you don't feel that you have that, that's step 1, is recognizing that maybe I have a friendship, community, and tribe problem, a challenge, right? So once you've recognized that there's value for it, just like integrating a morning routine that you talk about in your book, it doesn't actually take that much time in our actual life. It's not about running around and having the most amount of friends. And it can be as simple as coffee date that you do with individuals. It could be as simple as scheduling a phone call to chat with your best friend from college who you still consider your best friend, but they don't live in the same town as you. It's not about quantity, it's about that quality. But you will never make it a priority if you don't firsthand see the difference that it makes in improving your life. When I have something that I've gone through in my week that's challenging and I can go to a friend and talk about it, that's when I make the connection that I'm so thankful for the friendships in my life. When I went through the hardest challenges in my life and I had a tribe around me that said, hey, how can we help you? Whether it was a death of a family member, whether it was a breakup, whether it was a business conflict that was there. When I am able to go to the people around me and say that I'm so thankful for having these individuals in my life, that's when I look back and reflect that I'm so glad I put all this time and effort and energy into friendships. And those are the big situations. I don't want to just say that we rely on our friendships during, these macro stresses as you talk about. How about just fun and enjoyment? My week is more fun when I take a few moments. I'm lucky that I am in an office building with one of my friends that is a few offices down for his company. Even if it's 5 minutes, I pop in and I say, hey, what's up, man? How's your day? Amazing. We give each other like a quick hug and I run back into like my world and his world and I may not see him for the rest of the week. That actually leaves me with a little boost of energy that I come back to my daily life with. If you want to thrive in life, if you have big dreams and goals that you want to give attention to, if you want to feel love and deeply connected to the people in your world, if you're going through a challenging time in your life, maybe you're a new parent for the first time, if you're starting a business and you want to create something incredible, the bigger your goals and dreams are, the more you actually need deep, meaningful friendships around you to support you in that process. So we went from this time period in history where we were relying on each other for survival. Now we actually don't really need each other for survival necessarily, people that we know, intimately know, friendships, but in a way, people are a little confused. They're confused because, hey, I'm living, I'm doing my job, I'm driving to work, I'm getting through the day, and you can almost forget that you're missing out on something. Deep, meaningful friendships. What's the value of sitting down in the morning, going to coffee with a friend and saying, you know what, I've had a really tough week. and this is what's on my mind. And even if that friend doesn't give you advice, just them listening profoundly lets your nervous system know that you are not alone. And that's why I'm raising the alarm when it comes to having us check in and saying, just because you're surviving doesn't mean necessarily that you're thriving in your life.
Yeah, I mean, so powerful. And I guess, what you're saying is, for most of our evolution, having a tight-knit community, having really good friends was essential. It was critical. You wouldn't be able to thrive. You wouldn't be able to survive without it. So it's gone from being critical to now being optional. We're kind of living in this world now where we don't need friends to survive, but we certainly do need them to thrive. I hope you enjoy those short clips from previous conversations I've had on the podcast. If you want to listen to those full conversations, you can just click on the buttons on your screen now.